Welcome back to another episode of Games and Writers, and you are in for a special treat. This is the beginning of a brand new world. Now, last time we did mention that SJ Scott Varango would be co-hosting, and now we are trying out a new format for the show. And so he has, for some strange reason, agreed to be a part of that as well. I keep giving him opportunities to back out, and he's always like, "Oh, sure, I'd be happy to help." So I don't know. After a while, I'm gonna have to start taking advantage of him. Anyway, welcome to the show, and of course, Scott, welcome as always. And
thank you, and hello, everybody.
You're pretty much part of the show now, so I don't even feel like I need to welcome you anymore.
Knock that shit right off.
Sort of like when somebody comes over to your house enough times, you stop offering them things. You're like, you know what? You know where it is. If you want it, just go.
You've got your own key at this point. Just get your own.
You own it. You own the house now. So, how are you doing today?
Terrible. Not too bad. Not too bad. No, sorry to let you down. It's a pretty good day. Although we are in the middle of one of those fun lake effect snowstorms in central New York right now. So I think there's a little pause because I just took the pup out for a walk and we didn't come in covered in snow. But they're talking in terms of a foot or so by the time it's all done.
Yeah, gross.
Yeah, it is. But that was one of the first things I wanted to ask you, because you grew up in Michigan. Yeah. So you had Huron and Michigan. Do you guys get a lot of lake effect snow in Michigan? Is that a thing there?
Yeah. At least on the western side where I grew up, because things, I don't know, they always seem to go like, west to east or something. So stuff would come in off of Lake Michigan. And it would be, lake effect it's almost like a god.
Yeah.
So there would be snowflakes, this big around, pouring. It was just insane.
Yeah, they hit your head and leave little dents and stuff like that. Yeah. We actually used to have a band around here called the Lake Effect Blues Band. That's how big a thing it is.
And I don't mind that part, that type of snow as much. What we get in Iowa, it seems like, is just like that icy, nasty, just pelting your skin kind of stuff.
Yeah, the little tiny flakes.
Oh, it just sucks. Yeah.
We had a storm that did that last week, not a major one, but it just so happened that I was out again with the dog, which is like 90% of my life these days is walking the dog. But they were those little flakes, and in my mind, I was thinking about, the writer thing always kicks in. Some dialogue started playing in my mind where someone was like, first I think in my mind, he mentioned the fact that the Eskimo or the Inuit people have like thousands of names for snow because each different variation gets its own name. And then these little flakes, I was thinking he would say, and then there's this kind of storm with those little sweaty snowflakes that are just so aggressive,
Yeah, I don't know. This year's been sucky, for me in terms of snow. Like the winter actually started out really nice. It was warm. My mom and dad, who were from the south, they're like, this is like a winter like we used to remember from down south. Isn't bad at all. And then winter was like, oh really? I'm not working hard enough. They're like, kill. And it just made it its mission to actually murder everyone. And it has been really brutal from then. I'm just sub-zero temperatures, snow. I'm constantly out clearing the driveway. It's really brought it home that I don't know that I'm living in the right state.
I hear that. Kim and I actually have she's calling it a 5-year plan. I call it our tentative 5-year plan to be someplace warmer in 5 years than or at least for this time of year.
Yeah.
If we could, we're even talking about not necessarily getting a mobile home or anything, but just a good size travel trailer that we can take down south and park for the year, and without having to pay huge lot rents or something like that, and just go down there for 5-6 months out of the year and stop living in a place that makes my face hurt.
Right. Yeah, no, I hear you. I mean, and really, every year since I was turned 30, I've kind of thought this, but this year has been particularly bad. I think it's just, well, I'm starting to get a little bit older. The kids are making me even older than that. And I'm just like, I don't want to do this anymore. I just
Yeah.
don't want to deal with it anymore.
Right.
Well, it is what it is, and deal with it. So I wanted to get something out of the way. Not out of the way, because it's actually a good thing, but the show did get approved for sponsorship from Pinnacle Video. And so that's all good. So when you guys use our links to purchase video editing software from them, which I have used and it's good, then you are helping us out as well. And Pinnacle Studio Ultimate is the ultimate video editing software. Edit your media your way with the power, creativity, and control of Pinnacle Studio Ultimate, and edit your next production like a pro. Pinnacle Studio Ultimate delivers the tools you need to create pro-like videos, including premium effects from New Blue Effects. This fully loaded advanced editing suite delivers unparalleled precision and control, along with multi-cam capture and split-screen video for a big screen effect. Create HD and 4K videos with the controls, filters, and precision you need to edit like a pro. Go beyond what you thought possible with Pinnacle Studio Ultimate. And
with that reading, you can now check corporate spokesman off your bucket list.
It is amazing, though, when I look at the video editing software available now compared with what it was back when I first started getting interested in that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
It is just incredible. I mean, it used to be like Windows Movie Maker was like, the only...
Right, or QuickTime.
Or QuickTime, yeah.
Because QuickTime originally, when it first came out, you could do a little editing with it. Not a ton. It wasn't full featured by any means, but you could. And that was pretty much it. QuickTime and the, what was it, WMV were the Windows movies, Yeah,
it's crazy. I mean, because with Pinnacle and then there are others like it, which I probably shouldn't say, but there are
bad ones.
bad. But I mean, you can do like green screen's been around for a long time, but now you can do like 3D editing, video editing, like 360. Just
I can simulate 3D. Watch this.
Whoa.
Pretty freaky. Yeah.
Do you ever go to 3D movies?
I think I've seen one, and it was actually at Disney World. It was they had an exhibit that was, I think it was when that Bugs Life movie came out, and so we went in, we got the glasses, we went in, and we watched like 40 seconds of it, and the projector broke. And they were like, they had to send someone out in front of the screen and apologize, and it was, but for that 30 seconds, it was astounding.
Yeah, sorry, the projector boy, his fist got 3-dimensional with the projector. Yeah. Well, it could be, I don't know, whoever was running the projector could possibly, have had done some mailing of items, packages or letters in Russia, because thing that you can get in Russia now at the post office is booze.
What a brilliant idea.
Yeah, I know. It's actually don't remember where this story. Do you remember where this story came from?
Let me see.
And I don't even remember.
You know what? I turned off when we were talking about this stuff.
Yeah.
I turned off the headers and footers. So
actually,
where I think it was?
BBC.
It might have been BBC,
it was.
Right?
Yep. So Russia's beleaguered mail service plans to keep local post offices open by letting them sell beer. Among the first to notice the new goods on sale was a caller to a post office in Murmansk. Is that right?
Yes.
That region in the far north of the country. And I love the quote. And the guy's like, it looks like actually, you should read it. You do a better Russian accent than I do.
Let me find it. Why don't I have this one? I know. Oh, there it is. Okay. Trying to find the right quote here. This is
the one about the Russian post couldn't sink any lower.
Oh yeah, that one there. Okay. It looked like Russian post couldn't sink any lower, but it turns out they could.
I would love to know the history of that. Like, What led him to that pronouncement? Like, what have they been up to up until now?
Right, up until now, as if beer was just the worst of many bad things. Well, there's a picture that is on the post that shows three beers apparently for sale. I would assume in rubles, because one of them's 150 and one's 135. I am not paying that many dollars for a bottle of beer. But anyway, in the background on the wall are all these calendars, and there's one that just has a pig standing there looking at it. So maybe that was what was upsetting them before. It was the pig calendar. I don't know.
It's funny because things don't really change that much across countries.
No, they
people
don't.
complain about the weather. They complain about the post office.
Yep.
They complain about
DMV or their equivalent.
DMV. Yep. And we just
yeah, that's like my standard joke for you know how they call Disney World the happiest place on earth. Right. I always say for the 50th year in a row, the DMV just missed out to Disney World again.
Or as Dave Barry calls place. It, like Disney, you will be happy. Disney World. I think if you get a frown on your face, they throw you in prison or torture you.
That's what all those tunnels under Disney World are for.
Like, non-compliant guests.
Unhappy person in the teacup ride. And you turn it and it's like, Ma, where'd you go?
Large burly men in overalls come cart you away and make you happy. Oh boy, I don't even want to know what that.
Yeah, that reminds me of the old Monty Python line where everybody in Happy Valley was so happy except for this one guy, and there's he's on trial for being unhappy, and the judge pronounces his sentence. I sentence you to be hanged by the neck until you cheer up.
Oh man, the story about the beer quickly made its way into the national media as well, which I guess Russia does have national media, which found out that the ale sale is not a one-off initiative. The Murmansk Post Department says 40 of its 152 branches already have low alcohol drinks, which means no wine or spirits, which I also thought was odd. I mean, vodka. I mean, you just give everybody a shot of vodka.
They have that on tap in Russia, I believe. Not like in your house. You have hot water, cold water, vodka.
I mean, yeah, it would make sense, because not only would that get people into the post office, but it would make them happier while they're doing what most people consider to be an odious task. It's just
Absolutely.
kind of a win-win. I mean,
as writers, I think all of us at some point, dream of our collective correspondence being published. I'd have been writing a lot more letters if I knew there was going to be beer at the post office.
That's actually something we can talk about sometime too, because I have had some. It worries me a little bit because so much of my correspondence is in throwaway stuff like emails, texts, and chats and stuff. And now when it comes down to my life, like, I'd see the body of your work. And like, there's nothing. There's nothing.
Just hold up a hard drive. I think it's on here somewhere.
Hopefully it's still there.
Yeah, right. The hard drives I've been living with lately, it's like 10 minutes, done. I think I bought all my hard drives from the Mission Impossible people. Remember how they would do the briefing and then the message would explode?
Right.
Yeah, that's who produces my hard drive.
Russian Post press secretary Daniil Skidin, I don't know, sprung to the defense of the policy, which Interfax says has prompted, quote, largely negative or satirical reactions. I don't know what they expected. Now, the negative stuff I don't understand, because I think it's a great idea. And if we, they're way ahead of us in this regard. They're winning the culture war as far as I'm concerned with this move alone. But the satirical stuff, I mean, that was just obvious. Yeah,
you're asking for it with that. But it would be good-natured satire, at least in my case. I wouldn't have anything really bad to say about that. I think it's a strong policy. And I wish Mr. Trump would do something about this here in America.
You could really turn those poll numbers around just with one policy. And talking about the satirical thing, that it would get even funnier. Like, the more trips I made to the post office, the funnier I would be. At least in my own mind.
Comrade, you've posted 52 letters today. Only fairy tale. Wait a minute, let me run home and write another one.
Yeah. So now that Scott is going to be something of a regular around these here parts, I figured we could, you know, um, do a little history, a little bit of history of how we met, perhaps, and then there was something you wrote on your blog a while back that had some really scary stuff in it about,
It's frightening.
similarities between us and just frightening stuff. So to just start this off, I met Scott on Twitter, and I believe, and correct me if I have this story wrong, but I sent out some sort of tweet. I don't know. I think I was writing a humor blog at the time, and I think he'd been to the post office lately, and so he found it amusing and tweeted back, and we had this little running conversation there, and then it just went from there. And then he had a humor blog as well, still has his actually, things to laugh about. And so we would go back and forth. We would comment on each other's posts or tweet about each other's posts and stuff because we found each other hilarious. Whether anybody else did or not, I don't know. But it was fun. And so things kind of went on from there. And since then, we've done all kinds of things. So I've written some books together and tortured our audiences together in various ways. And this is just the latest iteration of that. But throw this over to you, Scott, and to tell us a little bit about this blog post of yours.
I wrote it according to the byline here on January 28th of last year. So just about the time we were getting ready to release Assignment Dublin.
Oh yes, that book.
And I had been noticing for a while that there were a lot of similarities between Craig and my life. And the first and most obvious to us both, and Craig's mentioned it before, both our wives are named Kim. But a few less obvious, perhaps. Well, we both have two children. He had twins, so he had his in the more efficient, a few minutes apart. Mine took 3.5 years before I got both of mine. So those are the two obvious ones. Then I listed a few less obvious, like Craig grew up in Michigan. I also grew up in a state, just not the same one. Craig lives in Iowa, a state with 4 letters. I live in New York, a state with 3 letters, followed by 4 letters.
That's a scary. That's
Isn't that
scary
freaky?
there.
At this point, we had never met face to face. We have since then, but it says Craig has never seen me in person aside from the times I've stalked him at book signings, wearing a big hair wig and Lenin-esque glasses.
That's who that was.
And then in the blog post, if you go to sjvarango.com, you can read it yourself. I had a nice guy with an afro wig and Lenin glasses saying, "Hello, Mr. Hart. Will you sign my copy of Serenity Submerged? Available now, along with all the other Shelby Alexander thrillers at your favorite retailer." That's just the way I normally talk
Right,
when I meet
exactly.
people. So, let's see. There were a couple other. Craig met me on Twitter. I met him on Twitter as well. How weird is that? And what was the last one here? Oh, Craig was born in 1980. I was drunk in 1980, so there was that. Yeah, I think that was the gamut right there. So freaky, huh?
Yeah, crazy. I mean, we're basically the same person. Well, and until we had met, there were a couple people who did say that they had never seen both
us
of
in
us
the
in the
same
same
room.
room.
Including both of us said that at least once, I think. So.
Yeah. All right. I do want to mention, too, and announce, actually, that we've sort of partnered with a sketch comedy group known as The Last Retort. And it's run by Will Altman and some others, and some other people we know actually have been involved with it as well. But they've given the show permission to re-air some of their stuff, and they're very short, just like sketch comedy and just little snack-sized humor bits. So I'm going to go ahead and play the first one today. And that's Will there. Guy
I,
makes me laugh.
I love Will. I do. He's great.
That sweet sketch money.
uh, Craig showed that to me earlier, and I was laughing hysterically just seeing Will like stick money in the lint filter, and then that ending, I almost fell out of my chair. I was like, "Oh my god,
Yeah,
no!"
I love the little. He attempts to flee. Laura McHugh is an internationally best-selling author and lifelong Midwesterner. Her debut novel, The Weight of Blood, was an International Thriller Writers Award winner and Barry Award nominee for Best First Novel, and it was named one of the best books of the year by BookPage. She currently lives in Missouri with her husband and children. We recently caught up with Laura to ask her about her writing process and her upcoming books. So you finished your second book, or your third book, actually. You're waiting on a third book to be released, right?
Yes, it'll come out August 6th.
Okay. How did publishing your first book change your process of writing?
Well, it changed it quite a lot in the beginning. For the very first time, I had someone waiting on this new book. The second book had sold before I wrote it. And so now all of a sudden I had deadlines. I had people, I expecting something, and they wanted it to live up to or surpass, my first effort. And really, I had put everything I had into Weight of Blood. That first book, you work so hard on that and you're done. It's like, well, what's next? You've got to do the next one. So I was trying to work more quickly with deadlines and such. And I thought if I could outline at the beginning, it would go a little more quickly. But when I wrote The Weight of Blood, I was just writing the story, and it just really grew as I was going. I didn't know what was going to happen. And so for me, trying to outline, I did not enjoy it. It really kind of sucked all the joy out of it to know what was supposed to happen and just try to get there to those points. So I ended up pretty much scrapping my outline. That was all wasted time. And I kind of went back to my regular method.
Interesting. It's actually good to hear, as purely selfishly, because I have felt, that if I could just outline, things would be a lot easier in terms of the writing process. But I've never been able to do it, and I've always sort of felt like I should be able to do it because, especially when you're early on trying to learn the craft of writing and reading all of these books about writing and stuff by writing coaches and teachers and telling you what you should do. And just in one of the top things was outlining. I felt like with a couple of notable exceptions, that was one of their number one pieces of advice. And I never could do it. Like the most I could do is outline a chapter or two in advance. And that's just not the way. And I finally, I think, just came to peace with the idea that's just not how my mind works. What I will do is outline in, after the fact. So if I write, I'll go back and outline what I've already done, because that kind of helps me have a bird's eye view of what's already happened, and that can keep me on track.
Yeah.
But yeah, in terms of sitting down, I envy the people in a way who can do that. Sit down and outline like books in advance. But yeah, I finally realized this is not going to happen for me.
So, yeah, I think that's okay. Whatever works for you,
Right. Yeah. So after The Weight of Blood, your next book was Arrowwood, correct?
Yes.
And that's the one that I'm currently reading, and it is amazing, by the way.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. What was the biggest difference? Well, I guess you kind of answered this in terms of, the expectations. But were there any other differences between writing your first book and writing your second book in terms of craft, perhaps?
In terms of craft, I'm not so sure. I mean, I feel like with each book is different. And I always think this time I'm going to really figure out, I'm going to do things some different way, and I'm going to figure out the perfect way to do this. And I'm going to learn so much from writing it. And I try that every time. And then I just kind of end up going back to the things that work for me. But I tried the outlining. I tried something that I did that was different with Arrowwood, a major difference from the Weight of Blood. Weight of Blood had two different timelines and it had multiple narrators. And when I was going back and editing that, I was like, why did I do that? It was very complex, especially for my first novel. And I thought next time I'm going to try to write a book where it's just one narrator and one timeline and it's pretty linear and it's just going through, not switching back in time. And there are some advantages to that. It's simpler narrative in a way, but it was harder in a way, I thought, because when you have the multiple narrators and the multiple timelines, when you get tired of being in one character's head, you can switch to another. It gives you a nice break. And also, if you need a piece of information to get out there that your main character would not know, I mean, that's so easy to do when you have these different timelines and different narrators. When you have the one person, you can only know what they know.
Yeah.
And so you kind of have to have different strategies, especially, I mean, it's a mystery. And so if you're solving a mystery, you have to have different strategies for them coming across these clues and, you know, figuring out what's going on when they don't have these other methods of doing it.
Yeah. And doing that and getting that information across in a way that doesn't seem too obvious is also a chore. I mean,
Yeah.
I've read books where somebody wasn't that deft at doing it, and it's sort of like it always reminds me of those old radio programs where it's radio, and so you had to give information to the listener that they couldn't see. So the actor would be like, "Oh my, he has a gun." You know, it was just beat you over the head with the information, and it's it's easy enough to do that because it's a lot of work to. I mean, if you're writing in a certain viewpoint and you know that you can't give out information, but in these very narrow ways, it's challenging. I will say that, and I do totally agree with you that when you have different viewpoints, I found that it is easier to move the narrative along. And I actually kind of like that as a reader, to be honest, because it breaks up the narrative and kind of provides these manageable chunks of text, and those of us with maybe a touch of ADD helps keep us interested as well. So yeah, I'm all about that. What kind of research do you do for your books?
Very, very little.
Well, they're kind of set in an area that you know pretty well, right?
Yes. Everything I've written so far has been set in a small Midwestern town where I've lived, or I've lived in a town, similar to a fictional town I've made up. Yeah. So I'm sorry, I got distracted by that. What was the main question you just asked me? About what research, right? Okay.
Yeah,
research.
yeah.
Yeah. So I do kind of write what I know. And something people have asked me about, there's some, themes in the first two books a little bit. And they're like, oh, well, did you go research that while you're writing the book? I usually work the opposite way. If something I've been really interested in and have read a lot about, then I'll write a book and incorporate that. So I don't go do research at that point. It's just things I've already read and absorbed over time. Like I keep up with a lot of missing persons cases and that sort of thing. And so then I'll write about missing persons, but I don't go research it. It's all just kind of cataloged already in my mind.
So I have always, I don't know, not always, but long been interested in the role that the Midwest plays in literature. Because there are a lot, I mean, every area of the country has their writers, of course, but it does seem like there are a lot of good writers who come from the Midwest. And there's always, again, not always, I shouldn't speak in superlatives, but there's often a common, kind of a common theme that runs to one degree or another through a lot of these books. Do you think there's something about this region that lends itself to creative endeavors?
I don't know. I mean, I think for me, I was very inspired by the Midwest because I grew up here. And there's just something very fascinating to me about the small towns and small rural communities and just the web of connections that you have when all these people have grown up around each other. They know each other's secrets and histories, and there are these loyalties and crimes, and all of those things are very fascinating to me. But I think it's very interesting to other people who know nothing about the Midwest. for them, it's kind of almost this exotic, different place.
Right.
You read plenty of books that are set in New York City or something like that, but you read a book set in the Ozarks or set in Keokuk, Iowa, and that's a place they've never been. And so it's got just a little touch of the exotic kind of, there's some interest of the unknown there, I think.
Yeah, I think that's accurate. One thing that I think that interests me about it is that you mentioned the web of connections, the closeness of the communities oftentimes, but that doesn't mean that there aren't secrets, and oftentimes it means that there are more secrets because in the areas that I grew up, humans are humans no matter where, but there are certain places where it is more appropriate to put on a face, something that's more acceptable to the society in which you're living. But stuff still goes on behind the scenes. And and when that happens in a small town, that's particularly interesting because it's like everybody knows, but nobody talks about it. So it really just lends itself to books that I find interesting, which are the secret, the family secrets, and the stuff that happens, behind closed doors, and you can really go. That's perfect. That's just tailor made for suspense.
Oh yeah, I agree.
Do you ever, when you're writing, project your own habits or whims or characteristics onto some of your characters?
I do. Yeah, I think there are little bits of myself in a lot of the different characters, but they're just tiny things. Like
Right.
Arden and Arrowwood, she has, tens of thousands of unread emails in her inbox, and that's me. I guess with that little habit. Yeah.
Well, I'm glad I contacted you on Facebook then.
I read the important ones, just skip the other things.
Do you read your own book reviews? Or not your own book reviews, but reviews that have been placed on your books by others?
Yeah, in the beginning, I definitely read, the professional reviews from the major review journals.
Right.
My editor would send those to me, and I kind of felt like I would have to read those. And, luckily they were good,
Yeah, no.
But you start reading, the Goodreads reviews and Amazon reviews. And at first I tried to read a lot of them. But I don't know, after a while, it's like, not every book is for every person. And I thought at first, well, I'll read critical reviews because it will help me in some way. It'll point out things I can improve upon or, be constructive in some way for me to read these things. But a lot of times if somebody hates the book, it's not that, the writing's bad or whatever. It's not something you could fix for that person. Like they hated this book.
Right.
Like, well, is it helping me to read this? Not really. Like, it's not helping me improve as a writer. And after a while, after that first book, and then you're on to the second book, you really don't have time to go and keep up with that stuff.
Right.
And thank goodness, because if I had the time to do it, I was, obsessing over trying to read those. I think you could really get caught up in that. But I don't know. I'm grateful for reviews. I'm grateful that people, they read the book and they leave a review. That's so helpful to authors to have
Right.
reviews up. But yeah, I don't read all of them at this point.
Yeah, you could go nuts trying to, if you actually were going to go and take the negative reviews to heart and alter things to meet the expectations of that one reviewer. A, there's no way you could do it, and B, again, you'd go crazy. Plus, there are times when somebody's not really leaving a review to be constructive. I've seen and received a couple where they not only didn't like my book, but they didn't like me as a person.
Okay, well, you can't fix that, I guess.
Right? It's like, I'm sorry. I'll go work on myself and come back later, and maybe you'll. So, yeah, and I agree that there was a time where I was pretty obsessive about reviews, not just getting them but reading them and what the star rating was and all that. But I finally was like, I could, all this time that I'm checking Amazon or Goodreads, where people are even harsher, it seems. I could be spending that writing, putting out the next book, and you kind of touched on that. So,
Yeah.
What do you think the most difficult part of your artistic process is?
I think I'm not sure if this is exactly what you're getting at, but for me, the most difficult part is I'm a slow writer, and I keep trying to do different things to speed up my work, but in the end, I always through, and I'm just very slow. I'm very deliberate with word choice. I don't like to have an ugly sentence. I want my sentences to be pretty.
Yeah.
And I just have a hard time trying to go any faster. And I would love to go faster, but that's just kind of how I write. I'm very careful and slow, and it takes me a little bit of time. So I have to spend a lot of time, a lot of hours just to get where I'm trying to go. And I think that's a little bit frustrating sometimes, but I haven't figured out a way around that yet.
Well, I could see how that would be frustrating, but your care for the craft definitely comes through in the writing. There are sentences where in the book in Arrowwood, I haven't read the other yet. I want to, where it's very lyrical, and it's clear that you took time with it and you weren't just rushing through it to get it out. So it's whatever you're doing well. So I wouldn't worry too much about if it's working for you.